Okay, so we're gonna do a video how to make a cloth face mask. So first thing to understand is it's not a medical face mask, it's a cloth face mask. It's really to protect other people from you. It's not to protect you from other people. It's so that you don't touch your face, so that's a protection of you. But otherwise, if you're sick and don't know it, you will not be spewing your germs out into the world. And I have been told about this pocket that eventually there may be a filter that we can put into the pocket. So I'm putting in the pocket because I believe in pockets, and I think women's clothes don't have enough pockets. So if I can put a pocket in a face mask, I'm going to put a pocket in a face mask. So here we go. This is what you need to start. There's the outer fabric. This is 6 by 9. Your lining fabric, and this is going to be the pocket. The lining fabric should be cut so that when you lay it on top of the outer fabric, there's about 1/8 of an inch short on all edges. See, there, you can see the outer fabric popping through. You're going to understand why we do that later, but for right now, you've got your 2 pieces of elastic. For a 6-inch side, these need to be at least 6.5 so that you can get them out of the way of the seam, the way I've laid them down here. You can make them bigger. If you're dealing with someone who has a really big head and a big face, you might want more elastic, but you need to have it at least 6.5, which is about what these are. And I'm going to pin them at the corners going in from the outside, and you'll see why that's important later. So we're going to do that on both sides to get this outer piece ready, and then we're going to go and we're going to do the pocket. So the elastics are pinned in the 4 corners with the loop headed inside the fabric so that when we sew around the edge, those loops are going to be in the middle. Okay, now we're going to go to the pocket. The pocket needs to be inside your seams. So what I'm working with here, and this is all just approximate, I'm going to try to finish it so that it's about 4 inches and then about 5 inches. So I'm starting with a little bigger than 4, a little wider than 5. And the very first thing I'm going to do is fold down a hem at the top, slightly larger than what I'm going to do on the sides. I'm going to do about 1/4 inch on the side, 1/4 inch across the bottom, 1/4 inch up this side, and then I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to do a quick zigzag across the top because I don't want to add extra bulk by turning it over another time. So I'm just going to go across here. Oops, I did that wrong. I want it like this. I'm so picky. I should have folded it the other way. We'll do it here. Fucking make a mess. Okay, so I'm going to do a zigzag here, right along the edge, so it can't ravel. Okay, pocket ready to go on. Trim off your threads, throw them in the wastebasket, back over here. So, we're going to put this on the lining, and we're going to just center it. I just do it by eyeball. I don't need to measure here. I'm just going to put it so it's approximate, put a couple of pins, don't have to go crazy, and now I'm going to go back over and I'm going to sew around that. No more zigzag. Pull out your pins as you get to them so that you don't run them over. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Nobody's going to see it. This is our pocket for whatever we may be able to put in it, which we don't even know. But at the very least, it's another layer of cotton between your nose and mouth and the great outdoors. Okay, pockets on. Trim our threads. Oops. Trim our threads. Back over to the iron. Now this fabric does not have a top and bottom. If your fabric has a top and bottom, if it's a one-way pattern, you got to make sure that you're taking the top of the pocket and putting it at the top. But we don't have to worry about that. Now, here's just a general sewing tip. I always keep 2 of these magnetic pin holders. When this one gets low, I swap it out for the one at the machine that's loaded. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna match up the corners. We're gonna put the pin directly under the little piece of elastic so that the fabric edges are lined up. This is gonna mean that you have to slightly stretch the lining to make it across, because I've told you to cut it smaller. So you're gonna kind of adjust the fullness. And what I do is I tend to pin in a little bit from the edge. I'm only going to be making a 1/4 inch seam. So if I pin in here, I don't have to pull out the pins as I come to them. I can just sew right along. I'm going to go to this side, do the same thing. I'm going to match up the corners, put my pin directly under the piece of elastic, go to the other corner, directly under the piece of elastic, take that extra fullness and distribute it across with maybe 3-4 pins, whatever you feel comfortable with. Just keep them back from the edge and you'll be able to feel your elastic underneath there. You want to make sure that's out of the way. Now we take the long edge, and again, we have to kind of stretch it out so that we can meet up the edges in the middle, distribute our extra so that it's not just going to be in one lump. You'll see why I do this in a minute, but
now there's extra because the backing is a little shorter than the
right, the
front.
Lining.
Okay.
We cut the lining 1/8 of an inch smaller. Now what I do, because I tend to get kind of distracted when I'm sewing, is on the bottom where I want to start and stop, I put 2 pins. This reminds me not to just keep going because I get in some kind of daze. So I put 2 pins. This is the bottom of the pocket. We can see the stitching. So this is the bottom of the face mask. This is where I'm going to start to go around. This is where I'm going to finish. So that's why I do the 2 little pins on each side. Now once again, I'm going to be stretching, finding the middle, making sure that these now line up. The fact that it's smaller means that it's pulling here, and that's what it's supposed to be doing. And you'll see why in a minute. So I've distributed the fullness, okay? Now that's ready to sew. I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna go back to the machine. I'm gonna sew only 1/4 of an inch, and part of the reason that I do this is that then there's no trimming. I'm not gonna have a whole bunch of fabric in there. I'm pulling slightly because of the stretch that I have to do. As I get to the corner, I'm right at the elastic. I'm going to pull out both pins so that I can now go across the elastic, and I'm going to go over and back and forward again. And then when I get here, I want to be just about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, but don't get crazy. If it's a little different, no big deal. I'm going to give it a little bit of a pull, because once again, I'm stretching it. I don't have to really pull out the pins because I've put them back far enough that I'm not going to hit them. But here, don't want to hit the pins. We're going to rotate. I can feel the elastic in there. I'm going to go just over and back and over and get my pivot. I can see my fabric's kind of pulling out just a bit. I'm going to kind of pull it back in there so my edges are lined up. And now I'm going to zip across here. I didn't pin low enough, so I got to pull that out. You don't want to run over your pins. If you run over your pins, you can have a nice big pop, break your needle, break your pin. Okay, so we're starting up again here. I'm just getting to the 3rd corner. So I'm going to pull in. I'm right up the elastic. I'm going to pick up and pivot. Also, you always pivot with your needle down, going back and forth, same as the other corners. Back again to my 1/4 inch along the edge. I'm going to give it the little stretch. Pin's not quite out of the way. Coming into the last corner, come right up to the elastic, pull out my 2 pins, pivot across, and the last edge, here's my double pins. Oops, I went across them. I'm leaving my opening for turning. 2.5, 3 inches, something like that is plenty. Cut off our threads. Pull out all the pins. And then the only trimming that we want to do is a little trimming at the corner. And what we're going to do is we're going to trim the top and the bottom and leave the little piece of elastic, because that's going to get secured a second time when we go, oh, that one's short, when we go for the top stitching. Oops. My little triangles that I am going to try to do a better job at getting them into the trash, because I have been finding them all over the house. Okay, now we're going to turn it. We'll go back over to the iron. So we're going to turn it through the hole, and the easiest way to do this is just to start pushing it through. And you're going to just push the whole thing through that little opening. And each corner, you're just going to put your finger in and pull on the elastic. It's a combination. You do not have to trim in real close. You're not making any fancy point. You're just removing some bulk. That's why we're cutting off those corners. So I've got all the corners pulled out, and my elastic's on the end. I'm going to turn it to the inside to do the pressing. And the reason I do that is that I want to see that my edges are nice and smooth on the inside. I can see just a tiny bit of the outer print. That means my lining is not going to show on the outside. This is why we made it a little smaller. It's going to sit perfectly flat inside with a little bit of the fabric from the outside showing. So that's why it looks good on the outside. So this is a trick you want to do anytime you're making something that you're going to be turning and you have a lining that you don't want to show. You just cut the lining a little bit smaller. So when you look at that, you can see all the way around, you've just got a hair bit of the outer piece that you can see. I'm going to find my little opening at the bottom, and I'm going to put my pin so that I realize when I get to this in the top stitching, I want to make sure that I'm going through both thicknesses. So I make sure that that pin is through both thicknesses. Now the pleating starts. What I want to do for the pleating is from the top, and this is the top of the pocket, I'm going to fold down on this side 1.5 inches. So it's not critical that it be exactly right, but somewhere in that vicinity, you're going to make a fold 1.5. Give it a nice crease. So when you turn it over, you're going to take that crease and you're going to pinch somewhere around 1/2 inch or so. It doesn't really matter. Don't get crazy. Put a little pin. The main thing is that they be more or less the same, so that the amount of space at the bottom matches. You put in the pin. That's your first pleat. Then you're just going to pinch another little bit. And the main thing you want to do is make sure that they're not overlapping. They're just coming right up to each other. And you're going to put a pin there. And that you do that on both sides. And I try to make this about 3 inches. So,
sorry, what's 3 inches?
from top to bottom, once I've done the tuck, it's about 3 inches.
Got it.
Okay? And both sides the same. And then I give it a press. kind of flatten it out. And the last thing I'm going to do is my top stitching around. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start anywhere you want, but I always start in the same place because I'm a creature of habit. I'm going to go 1/8 of an inch. If you're not good at top stitching, if you want to just do one, you can do one, but I like to do two because that's just who I am. I'm the top stitch queen. So the first one is close to the edge. My machine has this little opening so that I can see exactly where the fabric is. And I'm just going to buzz across. Where'd my pin go? Oh, I took it out. Okay, this is where the opening is. I'm making sure that it's catching both thicknesses. I lost my pin somewhere. Pivot around the corners. Just make sure that the edges are more or less straight. When you're going up against the pleat, sometimes what you want to do is just lift the foot so that it doesn't push against the pleat but goes smoothly over it. I'm going to trim these from where I started. When I come back around, I'm just not going to tangle up a whole lot of thread. Alright, so there's one time around. Now I just always like to do two. So I want to loose my thread, but I don't cut it. I just leave it like that. You save a lot of thread if you aren't constantly cutting your threads and starting over. So this is an unusual job that I'm doing one at a time. I never do one at a time. I always make 8 at a time, and I just go directly from one to another without cutting my thread. So this is a little unusual. Coming up, I've got that. And I can pull these pins out too. Well, can't get them. Going across the top. And my little thread that I just went from the other one. I do my double stitching at the end, all finished. Cut off my threads. My pocket is free. When we get that filter, we can put it in there. I've got my mask. I can try it on, spread it out. Charming and beautiful. You want it a little tighter than this. So you can't do that at the beginning. You got to come at the end if you want it tighter. And this is what you're going to do. Since you needed that thread as long as it was, if you want to snug it up, just going to take a little fold like that so that I'm eliminating. I'm going to try this and make sure, but I'm going to put a little pin in that. That's kind of going up on the diagonal, getting almost an inch because I got a little face. Gonna put a little pin in this one, and then when I try it on, it's nice and snug, stays right on my face. So there you go. And in the winter we can wear it as a scarf because we won't have coronavirus anymore.